participants. There was an English guy, a French guy, a Japanese, and an American, and they're on their way to an international business conference, and they got kidnapped by terrorists and taken to a secret hideout. Well, your companies, and your countries are enemies of the revolution, screamed the terrorist leader, and you are going to be executed. Do you have any last request? Englishman said, before I die, I want to honor my country and protest this barbaric act by singing God Save the Queen to all of you men. That can be arranged, the terrorist says. The Frenchman said, and I want to honor my country before I die by singing, I'm saying the wrong accent, the Marseillaise to your men. And the Japanese guy says, before I die, I want to honor country by giving a lecture I was going to present on Japanese style of industrial management. And the terrorist turned to the American and he goes, what do you want? The American says, I want you to kill me right now so I don't have to listen to another lecture on the Japanese style of industrial management. This young guy, he asked this old rich man how he made his money, and the old guy fingered his worsted old wool vest and said, well, son, it was 1932, depth of the Great Depression. I was down to my last nickel. I invested that nickel in an apple, and I spent the entire day polishing that apple, and at the end of the day, I sold the apple for 10 cents. Next morning, I invested those 10 cents into 2 apples and spent the entire day polishing them and sold them at 5 p.m. for 20 cents. And I continued this system for a month, and by the end of which I'd accumulated a fortune of $1.37. And that's how you built an empire, the boy asked. Oh, heavens, no, no, no. The man says, then my wife's father died and he left us $2 million. This motorist driving by a Texas ranch hit and killed a calf that was crossing the road, and the driver went to the owner of the calf and said what happened and asked what the animal's worth. Oh, about $200 today, the rancher said, but in 6 years it would have been worth $900, so $900's about what I'm out. Motorist sat down and wrote out a check and handed it to the farmer, and he said, here you go, here's a check for $900. It's post-dated for 6 years from now. These 3 farmers wanted to win the state fair contest for having the biggest hog, so they decided to stick a cork in the pig's ass and feed him for a month before the fair. Only problem is none of them wanted to be the one to stick the cork in, so they bought this monkey, and they trained the monkey to stick corks in bottles. And after a week or 2, they stick the monkey in the pen with a pig and a cork, and after a minute, the monkey did what he's supposed to. Fed that pig for a month, and sure enough, they won first prize for the biggest pig. Once they got home, they realized they still had to take that out. So they trained the same monkey to take corks out of bottles. They stuck the monkey in the pen with a pig, and the farmers woke up 3 days later in the hospital with a reporter sitting next to him. The reporter says to the first farmer, what's the last thing you remember? Shit, flying everywhere, the farmer said. The reporter asked the second farmer the same question, got the same response. When she got to the third farmer and asked him what he could remember, he started crying. The reporter said, what's the matter? And the farmer said, last thing I remember, look on that poor monkey's face when he tried sticking that cork back in.
That's adorable.
This old prospector shuffled into town leading this old tired mule. The old man headed straight for the only saloon in town to clear his parched throat, and he walked up to the saloon and tied his old mule out at the hitch trail. Well, as he stood there brushing some of the dust from his face and clothes, this young gunslinger steps out of the saloon with a gun and a bottle of whiskey. And the young gunslinger looks at the old man and laughs and goes, hey, old man, you ever dance? And the old man looked up and said, well, no, I never did dance. I just never really wanted to. Well, by then a crowd's gathered. Quickly, the gunslinger grinned and said, well, you did, old fool, you're gonna dance right now. And he starts shooting all around the man's feet. Old prospector, in order to not to get a toe blown off. Soon hopping around like a flea in a hot skillet. Everybody's laughing, fit to be tied. Last bullet was fired. The young gunslinger, still laughing, holstered his gun and turned around to go back to the saloon. The old man turned to his pack mule, pulled out a double-barreled shotgun, cocked both hammers back. Loud, audible double clicks carried clearly through the desert air, and the whole crowd stopped laughing immediately. The young gunslinger heard the shots too, and he turned around very slowly. Quiet was deafening. The crowd watched as the young gunman stared at the old-timer. Large gaping holes of the twin barrels. Found it kind of hard to swallow. The barrels of the shotgun never wavered in the old man's hands. The old man said, "Son, did you ever kiss a mule's ass?" And the boy swallowed hard and said, "No, but I've always wanted to." And there's 2 lessons here for you. Don't waste ammunition and don't mess with old people. So this minister decided a visual demonstration would add emphasis to his Sunday sermon. So he put 4 worms into 4 separate jars. And the first worm was put in a container of alcohol. Second, and put in a container of cigarette smoke. Third, put in a container of chocolate syrup. And the fourth, put in a container of good, clean soil. At the conclusion of the sermon, the minister reported these results. The first worm in alcohol was dead. Second worm in cigarette smoke was dead. Third worm in chocolate syrup was dead. And the fourth worm in good, clean soil is alive. So the minister asked the congregation, "What have you learned from this demonstration?" Well, Maxine, sitting at the back, quickly raised her hand and said, "Well, as long as you drink smoke and eat chocolate, you won't have any worms." And that pretty much ended the whole service that day. 3 guys there at a deer camp, they had to bunk 2 to a room. Well, nobody wanted to sleep with Randy because he snored so badly. They decided it wasn't fair to make one of them stay with them the whole time, so they voted they'd take turns. First night, John slept in Randy's room and came to breakfast the next morning with his hair a mess, his eyes all bloodshot. And the guy said, "Man, what happened to you?" He said, "Randy snored so loudly, I just sat up and watched him all night." Next night, it was Gary's turn. In the morning, same thing. His hair standing up, his eyes all bloodshot. Once again, they're like, "Man, what happened to you? You look awful." Except, "Man, that Randy, he shakes the roof. I couldn't sleep a wink. I just watched him all night." Third night was Herb's turn. Herb was this big, burly guy who loved to fish and hunt. He was a man's man, you know. Next morning, he comes to breakfast, all bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and he goes, "Good morning." The guys couldn't believe it. They were like, "Man, what happened with you?" He said, "Well, we got ready for bed. I went in and tucked Randy in bed, kissed him good night, and he sat up all night watching me all night long." Young Chuck, he moved to Montana and bought a horse from a farmer for $100. The farmer agreed to deliver the horse the next day, but the next day when he drove up, he goes, "I'm sorry, son, but I got some bad news. That horse died." Chuck says, "Well, just give me my money back." And the farmer said, "I'm sorry, I can't do that either. I went and spent the money already." Chuck says, "Well, all right, just bring me the dead horse." The farmer's like, "What are you going to do with him?" Chuck says, "I'm just going to raffle him off." The farmer says, "You can't raffle off a dead horse." Chuck said, "Sure I can. Watch me. I just won't tell anybody he's dead." Well, a month later, farmer meets up with Chuck and he's like, "What happened with that dead horse?" And Chuck said, "I raffled him off. I sold 500 tickets at $2 a piece and made a net profit of $898. Farmer says, "Well, didn't anybody complain?" And Chuck said, "Well, just the guy who won, so I give him his $2 back." Chuck grew up now and he works for the government.